Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the this afternoon's webinar. I'm delighted to be joined by all the way from San Francisco, where it's early and foggy in the morning, apparently, by employer brand expert Mark Hornung. This is the third in the series that we've run with Mark, which is great. And today we're going to talk about why nobody will go and work, for a stranger. Why, as moving career, changing job is a considered decision. It's more like the type of decision-making processes that business-to-business kind of buyers go through when they're evaluating different kind of ways to solve the problems and options than it is than faster kind of consumer decision makings, unless it's from a consumer point of view, it's a really big deal and a really big purchase. And changing jobs, working for new companies is like that. So individuals will take their time to learn about organizations. They will read lots and lots of different type of content, and Mark and I are going to dig into this in a little bit more detail. So Mark, do you want to just start with kind of an overview of your kind of point of view on this topic?
Sure. So, and thank you, Scott. It's always a pleasure to speak with you and to be a part of this. And hello to everyone in Europe and the United States and Canada. Happy to have you all here. The idea of employer branding and relationships is something I've worked in for many years with a lot of different clients. And it stems from the concept that all brands are relationships. And some relationships, like in our lives, are stronger than others. And the example that I always like to use is people who use Apple products tend to be much more fervent advocates for Apple than people who use Hewlett-Packard or Dell or Lenovo products. And that's because Apple over the years has very assiduously courted their customer base, and they provide a consistent experience for them. So they always have very high-end packaging. The design of the products is very sleek, very modern. And the software has, since the inception of the Macintosh, been very easy and intuitive to use. And all of this has created this bond between the company and its customers. And so to your point just now, when people are thinking about buying a PC, the thought is, maybe I should pop for a Mac. And I know lots of people who say, it's not worth the premium, because that's the other thing that Apple can do, is they can charge a premium for their products because they know people will pay extra for that experience. So there are the people who screen themselves out and say, I'm not going to spend that kind of money. I just want a basic PC, or I use a Windows PC at work, and so I'm comfortable with the user interface and the apps there, so I'm just going to get a Windows machine. But then there are the people who say, no, I really want that Apple experience, and I'm willing to pay the extra. To the point of our topic today, nobody will work for a stranger. The same is true, and again, to your point, Scott, when people are thinking about changing jobs, I've seen it ranked right up there with marriage and death of a loved one as a major stressor in people's lives. Because when you think about it, they're leaving behind the coworkers that they have now, many of whom are probably friends. They're leaving behind the familiarity of the location and the commute and all of that. And you, as the new employer, are asking them to give all that up in order to come join you. And so the question becomes, why would somebody do that if they don't know you? If they don't know anything about your organization? If they don't know who they're going to be working for? If they don't have a good sense of the culture? Now, in many cases, they may know something about the culture. Maybe they have a friend who works for you. And in fact, maybe that friend referred them to one of the positions that you have. And that's always a good case, because right away you have a connection with that candidate that otherwise you wouldn't have had. But in cases where you don't have a referral or they don't know someone well who works for you, now you have to resort to the tools that are available to reach out to and connect with candidates. And that starts, of course, with your careers website. It may also include talent communities that you develop. And it may also, and more and more so these days, will include social media. So your Instagram account will show photographs of what it's like to work there and company events. And, bring your dog to work day. Oh, here's the dogs of Teradata or whatever it is. And that gives you, the viewer, a sense of, oh, this is what this culture is like. Maybe you have an active Twitter stream. And so people will see content about your industry and your opportunities. Hopefully you're well established on LinkedIn and you have a fully fleshed out life section so people can see about opportunities in their specialties. And these are all tools that we use to begin the relationship. And then it falls on the sourcers and recruiters to really take the relationship to the next step and establish a personal connection with the candidate. And that's really the challenge, is how do you go about doing that? And what are some of the tools you can use for that?
This particular topic really underpins the what kind of drove us to start Candidate.ID, because before you have a conversation, a human conversation with anyone, one-to-one, all that you really have is you have a digital relationship, and that is candidates and people reading lots and lots and engaging with lots and lots of different types of content about an organization, about and it could be as they try to work out so I don't know much about, well, I know who the organization is, but I don't really know kind of what their direction of travel is, what's new
Right.
happening there, and how are they kind of how do they sit within their industry space? Are they a leader? Are they a challenger? Are they transforming kind of like to digital or whatever it might be? So what's the direction of travel for that organization? And would that organization, would working there be good for me? Would it look good on my on my CV? And then there's the, okay, yeah, if this looks like it's a good organization, I like what they're going, I like what they're trying to do, and could I see myself working there? Could I see myself doing meaningful work there? Would I enjoy it? Where are they based, and what would the commute be like, and what's the culture like? And so then they'll look at a lot of that stuff before they start to look at what are the kind of live kind of current opportunities. But they're going to do all of that without engaging with anybody from the organization before they would initiate any type of personal or kind of human relationship. So how do organizations adapt to that? How do they, if people are not going to engage, they're not they're going to stand off until they're ready to on their terms, then that means that marketing, if you like, has to pick up the slack of trying to kind of nurture and develop those digital relationships. And then you need technology to be able to see all of those things happening, so that the sources and the recruiters know who to focus on and who because you can't talk to everybody, so you want to really focus in on the people that are most interested and most engaged and a best fit, and that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, and this has been a problem for a long time. I mean, really since the advent of web-based recruiting, because and take one look at me and you can tell, I can remember back when people applied by postal mail or fax. But just that physical impediment of the act of sending out a CV or a resume took real effort. You had to print it out. You had to put it in an envelope, put a stamp on it, take it to a post box and send it, or put it in your fax machine and send it. But then with the web, you could send out hundreds of resumes, and some people do. And to your point, yeah, now for the recruiter or the sourcer, it's trying to identify the wheat from the chaff. I mean, who are the people who are most likely to succeed in our organization? And more importantly, who are the people who are actively looking or are very open to changing their current role? Because, anybody who recruits, and I've worked mostly in high-tech recruiting for the past decade or so, anybody who works in that field knows that there are lots of engineers and their profiles could be out on sites like Stack Overflow or GitHub. And it's like you see these people and you go, wow, they're perfect. We have to have them on our team. But then you find out they have absolutely no interest in changing. And so you've spent time trying to build that relationship. And, it's like at a dance going up to somebody and saying, hey, would you like to dance? And they go, no. And you feel embarrassed and you're like, oh, darn, But, the reality is if you can have insight into which people are most receptive to your message and also which people are actively looking, you can focus your energies on them and you're going to be a lot more productive. And I think also the process is going to go a lot faster because you don't have to overcome that inertia that occurs when people are, oh, no, I'm happy where I am. Why should I change? And now you have to make the case for them to change and get them to think about it. And of course, the inherent danger there is that they might say, yeah, I really should look around. And they wind up taking somebody else's offer. So, yeah, it's important to have that ability to identify the best prospects.
Yeah, I mean, I think that if you think about, if you think about roles that you're hiring for, there's always going to be a big pool of people, a talent pool of people that you would want to be able to talk to if you had the opportunity to. And if you put kind of opportunities in front of them, then that will a percentage, or there will be people who will apply. But those people that apply, it's so easy to apply now that those people to apply are kind of, generally going to be of a lower quality because they're out of work or they're, but trying to get the best quality from there is they might not be relevant. It's going to be really challenging. But there's a bunch of people who also have been interested by, what you've been marketing to them, who are learning about the organization and are kind of receptive and interested, but would be, you'd be pushing against an open door, if you were to reach out and contact them, or ask them to dance,
right.
So to speak. So the kind of psychology that sits behind kind of applying, I think, the difference between applying and being open to somebody connecting with you to have a conversation, I think is interesting.
Well, and I think it's also important, in today's world, every organization is a digital organization. And as a result, every organization needs analytics professionals, data scientists, and so forth, some more so than others. And the problem is that there are a lot of industries where, if I'm a data scientist or an analytics professional, I wouldn't think about working for them. You take, for example, retail. I was talking to a person at Nike, and I was joking that, they get thousands of unsolicited resumes and CVs every month. So recruiting probably isn't a problem for them. And at the time I was working for Teradata, and she looked at me and she said, no, I'm actually looking for the people you're looking for, because the data people don't think about going to work for a retailer, or even if we tap their shoulder and say, how about coming to us? They're like, well, I would be a sideshow. I'm not, if I'm at a company like a Teradata or an Oracle or an SAP, I'm in my element. I'm with my tribe, if you will. If I'm working for a retailer or an insurance company or a healthcare company or name the company, it's partly in the background because, the main focus of the organization is insurance or healthcare or what have you. So it's really a challenge to reach out to those people and say, hey, you may not know what we're doing in the digital realm, but it's really advanced stuff. And the impact you can have working for a Nike, for example, where the work you do is going to impact millions of people around the world, that's almost like the sure, you can play the small clubs, or you could have the main stage at Wembley Stadium. Which would you prefer? And so I think there's a challenge there. And to your point, being able to feed the content to people and say, look at what we're doing. And Billy and I talked about this a few weeks ago in the previous webinar. The company Weedmaps, which very quickly is a company here in California that has an app that helps people find cannabis sellers, because cannabis is legal in California now. And it's like a Yelp for cannabis dispensaries. And it has ratings from customers. It shows the different varieties of cannabis that they're selling and has ratings for them. It offers the hours of operation and the on and on and on. And their challenge is most of their users are on mobile platforms, particularly smartphones. And they have peak periods, as you might expect, on Fridays and over the weekend. And so they have to have a website that can scale for mobile quickly and offers a seamless experience. That requires very sophisticated technology. And so what Weedmaps have done is they've hosted a series of meetups with their chief technology officer, who describes the challenges they're trying to solve for. And that's what excites the technologists who come to these meetups. And you also learn along the way that the company is not just in it to help, sell cannabis, in the dispensaries, but is also funding a very major effort for legalization across the country. Now, of course, that's in their self-interest. But what it says is, this is a serious company. And I had the opportunity to talk with them, and I said, your problem probably is people think you're a bunch of stoners coding for a bunch of stoners. And the reality is, you're a very advanced technical company providing a service to people, and in an industry that's growing very rapidly. So, in a situation like that, they're being very smart about opening the doors, if you will, and letting people in and saying, look at the work we're doing. Wouldn't you like to be a part of that? And then it's been fairly successful for them. So I think to the extent you can do that using technology, then you're going to be a lot better off.
Yeah, and I think the key thing is being able to make sure that you reap the return and the benefits of all of that type of work because all of that type of effort will generate interest and conversations amongst a tiny percentage of the people that they're trying to talk to, but it will also stimulate a whole bunch of people going to look and learn about the company and learn more about the company, and being able to see that knows that you can then see who is most active in their talent pool and who they should follow up with next, and who they should continue to nurture with next, etc., etc. So none of the effort, none of the investment in time or in money is lost in terms of. So you're not starting from scratch again, and being able to use technology to help you with that stuff.
Right, okay. And I think that's why the case for employer branding is very strong, almost regardless of what industry you're in, because certainly for B2B companies, or for let's say academic institutions, or I spoke to a conference of HR executives in the life sciences industry here in the San Francisco Bay Area a couple of weeks ago, and I was talking to some of the folks at the event, and I said, my impression of your industry is that a lot of your founders are extremely intelligent PhDs who've come up with these incredible medical breakthroughs to help cure various diseases. And they find the concept of marketing to be somewhat anathema. why should I have to beg people to come to work for me? We're on a mission to save lives. We have a very incredible product. Who wouldn't want to be a part of this? And of course, here in the Bay Area and other places, Cambridge, Massachusetts, San Diego, certainly in Europe, there are dozens, thousands of companies that are doing this kind of thing. So there still is competition. And, I think one of the challenges in some cases is to convince the company leadership that you do need to market yourself to this type of talent, and you need to build these relationships, because the good people, as you pointed out earlier, they can go anywhere they want, and they know that. And in fact, that's why, it's kind of a well-known thing that a lot of the top web developers and software engineers don't respond to in-mails. I mean, they turn it off because they are bombarded by recruiters and sourcers all the time. So the question becomes, how do you break through that? And even if they're open to it, I mean, they're going to trash a lot of that mail. How do you build that relationship? And I think the way is, and you think about it, this is how they do it in product marketing. They will send you a message that you go, oh, wow, that's really cool. Yeah, let me find out more about that. And then all of a sudden they've got you, it's almost like fishing. They've hooked you, and now they got to reel you in. And that's the key.
Yeah, and I think that if what you need, the content that you've developed and you're sending out to share, to this, these type of people as an example, highly in demand talent, etc. If that is the primary focus of that is to get a response, okay, yes, I'm interested, I'd like to talk, then what that does, I mean, that's a little bit like chucking spaghetti at a wall, okay, and hoping that it sticks. It puts a huge amount of pressure on, so the spaghetti is the content that you're sending out that you're trying to get a response from, and the wall is the talent pool that you're chucking it at. It puts huge, I mean, that's puts a huge amount of pressure on that content. Whereas if what you're trying to do is get their interest, pique their interest, because you've already got the technology in place that shows you that they then, okay, yeah, they did go and read that, and then they went here, and then they went to learn about that, and actually they, a few weeks down the track, they looked at some of the job opportunities, and then you could see that they'd looked at the job opportunity, so you knew that it was time to kind of try and engage that, get a human conversation going, and reach out to them then. So that just takes all the pressure off the spaghetti. It just means that what you concentrate on doing is telling your story about your company in a way that you think is going to be interesting, which comes back, and that comes back into employer brand. So, a lot of what we think about doing is that we can really, is about turbocharging, the employer brand work, or making sure that you get ROI from it, or being able to get all the data that shows you what's working and what's not working, what types of content, what channels, what times,
Right. And I think it applies even, I've been talking mostly about high tech because that's something I know well because I've worked in it a lot, but I've also done work for, say, for example, transportation and logistics companies that are looking for drivers. And here in the United States, what we call truck drivers, you may call lorry drivers, there's a shortage of them. And so the question becomes, how do you get people, first of all, interested in the job itself, but then how do you attract, skilled, licensed, professional truck drivers? And there, it's not so much a case of, here are the technologies we're using, although that can come into play if you can show how your rigs are equipped with the latest technology to make their jobs easier. There are other things that logistics companies will use to talk about, like what they call no-touch loads. So all you have to do is drive it to the location and somebody else will offload the vehicle, guaranteeing that you'll be home every night. These are very important considerations for these people. And again, using the technology, you can feed content to that audience of truck drivers and say, hey, we've got the latest technology in our rigs. And a group over here, they're not biting. they don't really care. It's a truck, whatever, I'm going to drive it. I don't care. But if you start talking about no touch loads or you'll be home every night, that's ringing some bells. Now you can focus the message. So I think, and that's quite frankly, one of the things that's impressed me about Candidate.ID is that ability to see what resonates with your audience, because up until very recently, we couldn't do that. We could put material out there, we could put content out there, and we could certainly see engagement scores on social media. We could see how many people clicked on a banner. We could see if they, if they clicked on the banner and came to the site, did they buy the product? Did they apply for the job? We saw all of that, but we still weren't really clear in a very granular level on what was it exactly that got them to take that action. And the better we can know that, the better we can tailor our messaging. And to your point, instead of throwing spaghetti against the wall, we can begin to really, be very specific in addressing various audiences' needs. And, in my experience, you may see that people in certain markets, and this is particularly true here in the United States, there are certain markets where the commute is as much of a consideration in looking at a new opportunity as the compensation or the responsibilities, because the commutes are brutal. And so people will say, well, if it's over there, I'm not taking it because I'm not going to make that commute. So it's being able to identify what will appeal to specific audiences in specific locations, and then, pull back from that and say, okay, how does that fit into our hiring plan? How does that fit into our workforce plan for the next couple of years? That's really powerful stuff.
Yeah, and I think this, we do work with an organization that is based outside of London, and it's about an hour and a half north of London. And the people they want to hire are all working, it's FMCG, they're all working for other leading FMCG companies in London. Mm-hmm. And this organization happens to be based in Northampton. And they spend, as you say, they spend a ton of time, to try and get sales and commercial people kind of interested. And then there's always the Northampton issue, which is, you're based in Northampton. Sorry, I don't want to go there. And mm-hmm. Whereas, so what we're able to do is market the kind of the organization and the opportunities, but also include some stuff about Northampton at the same time. So anybody mm-hmm. that gets really engaged and is really interested and has already kind of they've already got themselves comfortable with considering Northampton as somewhere to move to, and that's who the recruiters focus on. So
yep.
But you just need to be able to see that, okay? Otherwise,
right.
Yeah,
right. We used to depend on anecdotal feedback for that. I did a project for a major utility out here in the Western United States, and they operate a nuclear power facility in a small coastal town on the central coast of California. And the challenge for them was most of the nuclear power facilities in the United States are in the Southeast. And when you try and recruit someone to come to California, they immediately go to Haight-Ashbury in San Francisco or Melrose Avenue in Los Angeles. I mean, they have no concept that there's a completely other California out there. And actually, the community they're in does a lot of farming. And in fact, they have a major university that has a very strong ag program. And so we did videos about, here's what you can expect when you come to live here. And it had tremendous success because it reassured the candidates and their families, you're not going to be with the crazies in LA or San Francisco. You're going to be among people like yourself. And it's going to be a very nice experience. But again, that was only because we had a lot of feedback from candidates and from recruiters that this was an issue. But the more you can pick up on that earlier and really see, this is becoming a problem, we have to address it, you're going to be able to nip that in the bud and be able to address it much more strongly.
I think a lot of our other clients, they think about how they're able to use the data that we can show to them for conversion. So, for example, in retail, they might see people who are happen to be living in Bristol or somewhere else, but they're looking at opportunities in Dublin. They're looking at kind of store manager opportunities in Dublin, and so. And they're a great fit. So, one of the obvious things to do is to kind of connect and message them around, what our amazing relocation packages are, which boom drives, gets a conversation going and drives conversion. So being able to, kind of see, what people are looking at and where they're based at the moment, it, kind of just drives what the next right piece of the conversation to have is.
Right. And again, I think that, the benefit we have today is, per our topic title, nobody will work for a stranger. You don't have to be a stranger to the audiences you're trying to reach. Yes, it will take some effort and it will take some investment to, build that relationship with those people. But the payoff is that you will find that your time to fill goes down. The quality of your hires is probably going to increase. And all of that translates into a better performing organization.
So let's talk about the first point here, which is so how smart sourcers and recruiters use personas to refine their searches and identify the best appeal to make candidates want to learn more.
Yeah, that personas, for those who aren't familiar with them, is a technique that marketers have used for years. People realized a while ago that talking about data, here's the demographic of our audience, and here's our typical customer is 28 to 35, female, has a household income of blah 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 blah. All of that's very true, and it's also very valuable because it does help you target your messaging, but it really doesn't create that emotional connection. And we know from studies that most purchasing decisions, including and especially including employment, are 70-80% emotional, and the intellectual part of it is almost a rationalization. You see this with certain companies. They rely on the fact that if you work for Google knows in their heart of hearts that you're probably going to stay longer than you might otherwise, because if you quit Google, your friends and family are going to go, "What are you doing, man? Why are you quitting Google? I mean, that's the best place in the world." Even though it may not be, and I'm making no judgments. I'm not saying they're good or bad. But what I'm saying is that they use that reputation to their advantage. And so the key is to be able to really use that and build on that. And that's really the key to it.
What okay.
And personas, I forgot to really get into the definition. So what marketers have done is to create an avatar, if you will, an imaginary person. So you take that 28 to 35-year-old female, and maybe you call her Anna, and you begin to describe Anna's life. Okay, Anna is married. She has 2 small children. She works out of the home. She puts her children in daycare every day, and on and on and on. Now you get a much richer picture of who she is. And then you can begin to say, here's how Anna came to find out about us. And here are the steps she takes as she gets to and completes her application. And what that helps you to do is to see all of the steps in the candidate journey, because it rarely, if ever, happens that people see an opportunity, click on apply and get the job. It's not that streamlined. Usually people hear about your company or your organization. They may have a friend who gets a job there, and they go, "Oh, I never knew about this company." And you start to read about it, or your friend tells you about it, and you're like, "Oh, interesting." Maybe you go on Glassdoor to check them out, or Kununu if you're in Germany, or Indeed more increasingly. and you see, oh, the scores are pretty good. Gee, I should look into this more. What the idea of personas is to help you map that candidate journey so that you can see all of the touch points, and as much as you're able, create the content and communications for those touch points that's going to present the best message to the candidate at that particular point in their journey. So, early on when they're doing discovery work about you, they may say, oh, here's some more information about the company. Here's where we have locations. Here's our history. Here's our products or our services, that kind of thing. And then as they dive deeper and you see through technology that they're really burrowing in on certain opportunities or certain markets, you can begin, like in your example, oh, we're in Northampton. Here are some really nice places to live. Here are the schools. You could see yourself living here, right? So the persona is a tool that's used to try and get a sense of how do you find candidates. Now, one person obviously isn't the entire category of people, but it helps you visualize it because people do tend to behave in similar ways. Now, what that also means is, in any organization, you're going to have salespeople, you're going to have production people, you're going to have operations people. And so each of those personas will be slightly different because they come to you for different things. The production people come to you because that's their specialty and they think you're a great place to further their careers in that specialty. So they're probably going to be focused on that. The salespeople know that you're successful, and so they're going to make a lot of money. And that's not a bad thing because the more money they make, the more money you make. So you're going to talk about, the great success you've had and how customers are just clamoring for your products or services. The operations people, it may be they see themselves in the mission and vision and values of your organization, and they say that's a company I could really get behind. I really like that. But you're going to need to construct personas for each of those, and in the process of doing that, you're going to better understand each of those markets, and that's going to help you establish that relationship. You're going to have a good sense of how to talk to those folks before you even reach out to them on Skype or pick up the phone.
Yeah, I think that's the beautiful thing about about personas, and even just keeping them simple is enables you to think about it from their point of view, from the target candidate's point of view, and what their main industry, what their main drivers or motivations or pain points are, and then to be able to to work out and pull which parts of the content that you already have from the kind of corporate, from the company story or from the employer brand story, whatever, to just get their initial interest going.
Right.
And then if you can then see what drives kind of most interest, most engagement, then what to keep developing more stories around. So
right. And it's going to be different stories for different segments. But to your point, I think one of the things that I often hear from employers is, oh my gosh, this is so daunting. Where am I going to find the time? Where am I going to find the resources to create this content? And the reality is the content is probably there.
It's already there, yeah.
Find it.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to, it's a little bit like the spaghetti on the wall analogy, is that, and we see this all the time where, just being able, there's always great stories and pieces of content within, what is already published, on the company site. And all you got to do is think, yeah, that strand of spaghetti there will be of most interest to these, analog or digital design engineers, because it's talking about, wireless charging, is talking about, something that happens to, improve a certain type of technology efficiency. And you can tell that story to the design engineers, and then you're off, and then they'll go and start learning about the company and etc. So, but one of the points is, talk to me about the pivotal role of emotion in building these relationships, and why the objective data such as compensation and titles are used to justify a decision instead of making it.
Yeah, Back when I was in brand school, we talked about the idea of, well, to use an example, why does BMW advertise? I mean, the reality is, if you're a car aficionado, you know about BMW. And yes, they have competitors, Audi and Daimler-Benz and on and on and on. But, why do they advertise the 7 Series when the reality is only a tiny, tiny fraction of the people who could afford one of those are in the audience that you're talking to? And the answer is that BMW know that buying a car like that, as expensive as it is going to create a lot of issues for you. Your friends and family are going to be, oh, hey, you're doing pretty good. I see you driving a 740. Now, part of you, sort of the primal ape instinct, is to say, darn right I am. I earned every penny and I deserve it. But you can't say that, or maybe you can, I don't know. But what you're probably going to say is, oh, but it's really safe. It has, really amazing brakes, and the airbag system is fantastic, and the deformable structure. In other words, they're using all of the content that BMW puts into its advertising to justify the purchase. The same thing is extremely true for employment. And again, if you're leaving a well-known company and going to, say, a startup or a lesser-known company or a lesser competitor, your friends and family are going to be, why did you leave that? Why are you changing jobs? And now you have to explain yourself. And so you need that ammunition, that content to say they're doing amazing work or they're helping more people get healthcare, or they're whatever it is. But they need that rationale to justify their purchase, or in this case, their change of employment. And so that's an important role that recruitment marketing plays in not only attracting, but also retaining current employees. Because we know that your current employees are among the biggest audiences for your recruiting messages. If they see a posting on LinkedIn or on Facebook or wherever, there's a little bit of pride. Oh yeah, that's us. We're looking for good people. But also, you may be reminding them when you're talking about, to your point, we have great relocation benefits. It's like, oh yeah, they really helped me make this move. And, it really brought me to a better community, and I'm happier because of it. And this gets to the whole idea of the recruitment funnel is really an outdated geometry, if you will, for the employer branding and employer brand process. We're really talking about a continuous loop, because as soon as someone becomes an employee, they're still in the job market, because they're still going to see their friends getting jobs at other employers. They're still going to occasionally get inquiries from recruiters. They may see a job posting that they go, wow, that's a really cool job. So, having that funnel that takes you to the end point of the hire, the hire is just the beginning. Now you have to remarket your organization to your current employees.
Yeah, and I think that you're absolutely bang on in the sense that people will, in the main, make decisions emotionally, but they need all of the rationale to stack that up behind it, so they can justify the emotional decision that they've made, both either to themselves and to other people that they're talking about.
Right.
Okay, last one. So how do you use data to recognize messages that resonate with candidates versus those that don't?
Well, I think, the tools that I've had available to me in the past have shown which messages get the most engagement, whether it's a click-through, whether it's retweeting, if it's a tweet, for example, whether it's sharing, if it's a tweet or on Facebook or on LinkedIn, if people comment on your content. And that can cut both ways. I mean, if people are commenting, "You're full of baloney, this is not true," then you've got a problem. But if they're saying, "Yeah, this is really great, and I'm really proud that my company is doing this," that was one of the most gratifying things. Is when we would put content out at Teradata and Informatica, and to have our own employees saying, this is why I work here. I'm very proud of this. This is really great. So it's being able to see analytically what works and what doesn't. Because again, back in the old days, you would have very crude feedback from the audience. You might, play a commercial, a television commercial or a radio spot, and your feedback mechanisms might be an 800 phone number or a fax number, or then with the web, you'd have your website. And in any case, what you would see in those days was simply a rise in traffic, which is, that tells you something. Okay, we, posted that message on this date, and here's what we saw. I did a program for a defense contractor in Arizona, in Tucson, and we did a radio buy as well as web and print, and you could just see the web traffic spike as soon as the radio campaign started, and after it ended, there was a gradual drop off. So we knew that we were on the air from this date to this date. It did this. Okay, obviously the radio did its job. It got people to come to the website. But back then we didn't know. Okay, what did they do? They came to the site. For all I know, they may have looked at it and go, oh, those guys? Oh, heck no, I'm not going to work for them. And they'd leave because we didn't have the time on page or the bounce back rates or any of those kinds of things. So, today we can see, oh, our bounce rate is this, that's not good, or it's really low, kudos to us. We can see what percentage of people go through from coming on to, and most people will find you through your job postings. And so if they click on apply here, you can see, oh, they came to the job description, they read the job description, they clicked on apply, and X% of those completed the application. And just one of the things that you can see from that data is, first of all, which job descriptions got the highest percentage of applies. Okay, so they were performing well, and there will probably be others that didn't perform as well. And we could have a whole nother webinar on job descriptions and why some work and why some don't. But you could begin to see, oh, this one's a stinker, this one really works well. But then when you see how many people began the application process versus how many people were able to complete it. And I always use that as a very good indicator of, is there something wrong with our process? Is it too lengthy? Is it too complicated? Is there a technical issue? And if you can use that data, to really identify what the issues are, you can clean that up, and you're going to improve your process. You're going to get a higher percentage of applicants.
And I think coming back to the to data and the data around available, that so when you have full visibility of all of what the candidates are doing in terms of what the content that they're engaging with across both email and job posts and social media and career pages and corporate pages, and then what that enables you to do is not only to to get these kind of like the sort of crude like macro anonymous metrics around that bit seems to be working a little bit more metric, but you can actually track it all the way through and see what really drives engagement and conversion. So which parts of our recruitment marketing, our job marketing, etc., that actually led to these particular hires all the way through end to end.
Right. And I think that it goes back to that idea of personas. So maybe you don't hire that many operations people. So, if I'm just looking at crude numbers of which pieces of content got the most engagement, maybe the ones that we targeted toward operations didn't get very high levels of engagement. Were they failures? Well, if we have the ability, as we now do with current tools, to see, oh, among this group, these messages did resonate, they just happen to be a small group. Okay, so that's working for us. So yeah, the more granular we can become, the better off we're going to be. And that's, and we can just keep refining this so that we can see, okay, this is what's really working for us against this audience versus, the operations or the sales.
Brilliant. So we're absolutely aligned, with your thinking, and it's kind of, and I think where we see ourselves is really kind of underpinning or sitting, as being, the technology that kind of really supercharges the type of work that you do, both in terms of the getting most kind of like return back from it, but also being able to generate all the data that enables you to work out what's working and what's not working. Because you'll know this from lots and lots of previous kind of lives, is that continually working to generate content that is going to solicit a response that's going to try and stick on the wall when you check it there is really exhausting. It's hard work, and particularly if you're flying completely blind,
Right.
But when you start to get metrics that show you that that's driving conversion and it's being successful, and we should delve a little bit deeper into that particular story or that particular emotional kind of connection, then it becomes much easier.
Right. And the other thing too is it can help you get a read on how strong your brand is. So if you're a Nike or a Google or any of the other well-known employers, you put stuff out there, and it's almost accepted that, well, we know this is a good place to work. Now, do they have something that works for me in my profession and what I want to do? As opposed to if you're not a well-known organization, you have to make the case for, here's why you should pay attention to us. Here's why you should consider us. And that kind of data that you just spoke about can help you understand, is it, the work that we're doing that's getting people's attention, or are they being turned off by our previous reputation? And let's be honest, there are some companies, for whatever reason, that have had troubles recently or challenges. Or maybe they've gone through a massive merger and there were a lot of redundancies that occurred as a result. They're going to have to overcome that skepticism. And people are, well, I've heard it's not really good there right now. Maybe you have to make the case that, oh, let us tell you about all the cool things that are happening now, or why we're on the right path. And I see that we have a couple of people asking for insights into job descriptions. Again, we're coming up on the hours, so we can't really do too much. But what I would say is that my opinion is that too many employers try to list everything in the job description, soup to nuts. And yes, your legal people will say, well, people have to know what they're getting into, and they have to be aware of what's going to be expected of them, and so on and so forth. But the reality is that the job description, when you think about it, is really there just to trigger a response. You want people to want to find out more. And this is one of the fundamental differences about the web versus print or broadcast, is the web allows the user to dig as deep as he or she wants. So if I'm looking for a job, I'm probably looking for a job in a field that I've trained for or have worked in for a while. And so I'm looking for that next step, or maybe I'm looking for a slightly different challenge. I want to know what I'm going to be doing. I want to know who I'm doing it for and how I'm going to be judged. Of course, I need to know the Microsoft Office suite, but I'll dig down and find out about that. Okay, maybe you have a click here for a detailed job description. Click here for detailed benefits description. You can create these trees where people can drill down as much as they want, but trying to fit all of that into your job description is just number one, nobody's going to read that much. People don't read these days, and I say that sadly as a former copywriter. But people really don't read these days, number one. Number two, you just want to get them excited, get them into it. So, for example, a lot of employers will start with a paragraph or two about the organization. If you're unknown, maybe, but wouldn't it be better to say, we have an opportunity for a data analytics professional. Here's the kind of work we're doing. Here's how you're going to fit in. Here are the tools you're going to be working with. Here are some of the great projects we're working on. And oh, by the way, this is who we are, and this is why this is important for our future. That flow to me makes a lot more sense than ABC company based in blah, 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 and on and on and on. And then you get to the job, and don't get me started on job descriptions that say the successful candidate shall have. Talk to the person. You should have this. You will be doing this. You will be rewarded this way. Get them into the conversation.
Yeah, and I think as well is that it's, advertising, job opportunities is something that you're always going to do. So what you need to do is think about, how is it that we could also use those to build our talent pool and also stimulate interest. Maybe they're not going to apply right now. So, the overwhelming majority of people are not going to apply right now. But if you offer them, hey, the opportunity, the call to actions around, stay in touch, or, sign up here to receive kind of feature and updates, or, what we think about, where the future's going. But also, click here to access this great piece of content about our latest salary survey, or what we think about this bit of whatever it might be. But offer them, offer them different kind of content offers to stimulate interest and start to build the talent pool at the same time.
Yeah. And again, you don't have to tell everything in the job description up front. You just have to give them enough that they get an idea of, wow, this is a really cool job. It's something I'd like to do. I want to find out more. Go to the careers website or the ATS or wherever you have the job description, fine. But again, don't bore them to death, and talk to them, create a dialogue, and then you can take it from there. And again, remember, you can give people links that will let them drill down as deep as they want. Maybe somebody is a minority candidate, so have a link to your employee resource groups and information about them. Okay, that person will look at that and say, wow, they're really strong about this. They're really committed to it. They're making a serious effort on this. That's great. So
we would fully support that, because having those links, we can obviously see engagement with all of those links, which tells us that, okay, they're interested in that and they're doing that, and now they're ready for a conversation. So
right. And you can also, and this again is another whole webinar, you can use those resource groups as vehicles to reach out to the various communities that they represent. And so again, that kind of content analysis says, oh, this is a real hot topic. We need to pursue this. And the benefit is we're going to get a more diverse workforce, which is good for the whole organization. So again, data really plays a role in helping identify that.
Hey, brilliant. Well, look, Mark, we're right on the hour. So I just want to extend my thanks again for you to take the time to join us. It's always great talking to you. I'm sure we'll have other webinar topics coming up that we can run. But thank you. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure, and enjoy the rest of your day. You're coming up on pub time, so I don't want to keep you.
Thank you to everyone who joined us, and we'll obviously send the recorded version out to everyone else follow up as well. Have a great day. Thanks.
Okay, you too. Bye-bye.